Are you having problems figuring out how to properly mix green stuff? Or does it stick to your fingers, making it nearly impossible to sculpt with? And do you have what it takes to become a green stuff master? Search no more, my friend. I'm Stefan The All-In Nerd, and I'm about to show you the way of the green stuff. Yeah. Alright, firstly, some basics. Here we have green stuff. Well, it's kind of more like yellow and blue stuff. But as everybody knows, when you mix blue and yellow, you get green. Green stuff is a two-part epoxy putty that starts a curing reaction when you mix the two parts together. And after a while, it starts to harden. The blue part is the hardener and the yellow stuff is the filler. It is really handy and can be used for a lot of different things, like when buying the green stuff, you can either buy it in two separate parts or in one string with the two parts already attached to each other. The strings can be all from a few centimeters to up to 90 centimeters. But I do recommend buying it in separate parts, because when it's combined like this, the chemical reaction between the two parts might have already started to happen in the middle, and you can end up with a lot of unusable putty. And sure, you can cut off the middle piece, but you'll end up with a lot less putty than you bought. And even if you cut a piece off, you might still end up with some hard pieces in your mix. And you can of course use some tools. When starting out, you don't need a lot of fancy tools. You'll get a long way with some toothpicks and your scalpel. Preferably with a dull blade on the scalpel. And sure, having some kind of tool like this do help, but you don't really need all of these. Alright, let's get an equal amount of each blue and yellow part to get going. A 50-50 mix. Mixing it with different amounts can have its advantages, but I'll get back to that a bit later. Green stuff is known for being sticky, so wet your fingers in water when needing it. And when working with the green stuff, you can keep your hands wet with water, olive oil, Vaseline, or even your own spit. Yeah, you heard me. Spit. I prefer using both water and spit actually. Make sure you mix the two parts properly. When you see that it's a solid green and it starts to feel a bit extra sticky, then you're done. Now, for example, we can fix gaps that we couldn't seal during the assembly part of the model. We can repair parts that's been broken, or even sculpt something completely from scratch, like hair, cloth, or even fur. The working time for a 50-50 mix is about 1.5 to 2 hours. The curing time is about 4 to 5 hours, and it will reach maximum hardness after about 24 hours. Let's start out with something simple. Gap filling. When I assembled this model, it left an ugly gap that I need to fix. Grab a small piece of green stuff and roll it to a thin string. Place it into the gap with your wet fingers or a tool. Press the green stuff into the gap and smooth it out. It's that easy. When dried, you can prime your model and the gap is completely hidden. Let's do some repairs next. Here I have a 3D printed rhino that really needs some love.
Hey nerd, your prints look like dog poop!
Is that necessary? Will, do you mind? Thanks. Woo! Since it was a lot of parts that needed to be repaired, I divided it into sections. And first I've put in some big pieces to fill up the hollow areas, and I let them cure before adding the top layer. And when that layer had cured a bit, I could start with the details. And it's really easy to carve in the green stuff with your hobby knife, both when it's hardened a bit and when it's fully cured. If the putty is too soft to get it the shape you want, just wait about 30 minutes to let it harden a bit. It'll be a lot easier to work with. Sadly, green stuff doesn't get hard enough so you can sand it though. And here's how it looks after priming. And I'm not the greatest sculptor out there, but I'm probably not the worst. Pro tip: if you're working with green stuff and you mix a bit more putty than you really need, and this happens a lot, you can take the excess green stuff and put it in your freezer to stop the chemical process. You can leave it there for a few days or even up to a week sometimes. And when you need some, you just go and get it and let it thaw for a bit, and then it's ready to use again. Okay, let's try and make some cloth. This dude needs a cloak. Grab a piece of putty, trying to stretch it out and pulling it until it tears. Always make sure your fingers are wet. Put the piece on the shoulders of the miniature and start to work it in with a tool so it looks alright. Make sure to tuck it in around the neck. And I decided to put on another piece to make a fold. There we go. That's an easy way to do a simple cloak. Here's how you can make it a bit more advanced one. Get some more putty and even it out with a roller. Using a bit of parchment paper around it will prevent the green stuff to stick to both the table and the roller. When flattened, cut out a piece that will fit onto your model. And I also used this cap from a pencil to make a round cut to fit around the neck of the miniature. Put it on and start working it. Here the putty is a bit too soft, so I'm waiting a bit before trying to give it the shape that I want. Patience is key. If it doesn't turn out the way you want, try redoing it before the putty hardens. And if it's already too late, you can always put on another layer on top of that one. Work smart and don't do too much in one go, because it's easy to mess up what you've already done if you add too much. Another pro tip! And here I have some tips on how to change the amount of yellow and blue to make a mix that will suit your sculpting needs. If adding more yellow than blue, a 75-25 mix, the putty will be a bit softer and easier to handle, which is good for detailed parts and hair. The other way around, more blue than yellow, and the putty will be harder and better for sharp corners and such. And it will also start to cure faster. So here I want to add some extra putty, and I choose to make a mix with a bit more yellow to make it softer. And when it's softer, it's so much easier to make it blend into the previous layer. Just look at that green beauty. And this is how the cloak turned out after adding some extra layers. Another great use of the putty with more yellow in it is to do hair and beards. Let me show you how I usually do a simple beard. I play Space Wolves in the Warhammer 40k universe, and there isn't many in my Space Viking army without a mighty beard. Take a small piece of putty and flatten it out. You can do it on a piece of parchment paper to keep it from sticking to the table. Cut off a small piece of it and that will be the base of the beard. Place it on his face and start to work it in. I used a lot of water, which also worked, but it made it harder to attach it to the model. In this situation you kinda want the putty to be a bit sticky, to get it to stick to the face straight away. Okay, let's speed this up. Make sure it attaches to his hair if he has any. I used a toothpick to make really small marks in his beard. Add a thin string to be put as the mustache if needed. If the model has an open mouth, you can just drive your toothpick in there to open up the beard. The toothpick and the scalpel works really good to make the tufts of hair. Just keep working it until you're happy with the result. If it doesn't work out, you can just redo it. This turned out okay for a fast beard job. And you can also create cool bases using green stuff, especially if you have one of these textured rollers. If you make some cuts in the base before adding the green stuff, it will stick better. Just slap some green stuff on the base, dip the roller in water and roll it over the base. Roughly clean it around the edges, and after it's fully cured, it's easy to cut off the rest. And here we have the bases finished. And take a look at this beautiful dragon egg, just like in Game of Thrones. Wouldn't it be cool to be a warg and to be able to enter the minds of animals and see through their eyes? But don't think that's all that green stuff has to offer. You also have liquid green stuff. What is this, you ask? Well, let me tell you. Liquid green stuff is kind of a liquid version of the original green stuff that will harden just after a short while. You could compare it to a texture paint. Perfect for small gaps. Use a tool or an old brush to get some out of the container and put it into the gap. It will probably shrink a bit, so it doesn't matter if it's not totally flush. If it did shrink a bit, then you can just add another layer of liquid green stuff to even it out. And if you had your liquid green stuff in a drawer for a long time, and it's starting to get hard, you can reactivate it with some water. Secret pro tip. There's also a solution that you can make yourself that's kinda like liquid green stuff. It's called Sprue Goo. It's really easy to make and it's really easy to use. To make Sprue Goo, you need some plastic cement, like this Tamiya extra thin cement. And next you need some, you guessed it, sprues. Cut the sprues in small pieces and mix it in with your plastic cement, until you get a nice gooey texture. I prefer to mix it in the actual bottle from the plastic cement when I run low on glue in it. Put the sprues in and leave them to dissolve. Then you can simply apply it with the brush that's attached to the lid to cover up some smaller gaps. Easy, huh? Here I have 4 gaps that's been filled. The first one is with green stuff, the second one is with liquid green stuff, the third one is with reactivated liquid green stuff, and the fourth one is with Sprue Goo. Here's before priming, and here's after. And that should cover at least the basics of the green stuff. Thanks for watching until the end of the video. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. Until next time, make sure you have a great day and...